Fellow actors, we live in a dark time. The world is becoming more and more violent, and the idiots in charge are making it worse. What the world needs is an international advisory committee who truly understands global politics, namely, us.
The time has come for us to start using our acting talents in a different way.
Yes, we can use our powers to change the world.
We will persuade everyone to drive hybrid cars and stop smoking.
If we focus our acting on global politics, we can change everything and stuff. As actors, it is our responsibility to read the newspapers and then say what we read on television like it's our own opinion. Matt Damon.
What we're really seeing here in the Eternals is just the diversity of this cast here.
Right.
Different of such a diverse team.
Such diversity, inclusion.
Diversity and the inclusion.
First gay superhero in it.
Diverse
for a diverse cast. For so long, we've seen superheroes that have looked like a small percentage of the world.
Diverse storylines.
The most different of all the post-Endgame movies.
Such a diverse cast.
It's an incredibly diverse cast.
It is diversity cast, but it doesn't feel tokenistic.
Married to a gay superhero. What does that mean to you as a gay man, a gay actor in this town?
Can you imagine how many lives this is going to be saving?
Oh, I'm getting overwhelmed.
Let's go ahead and get into it. I want to keep this review / discussion somewhat organized. So I just wrote some bullet points down as far as the different content that I want us to talk about, and then we can, if we have any more like closing thoughts. I have quite a few notes.
Okay.
So
I do too.
This is a 2-hour movie. It is far too long.
Talk about V for Vendetta. I mean, not V for Vendetta, but Eternals, right?
Oh yeah, it's like the movie feels like it lasts for an eternity.
Yes.
I was physically.
They got the name right.
I was physically tired coming home after watching it in the theater. So
I was tired in the theater. Almost. There was a point where I nodded off and then, woke back up.
So I want to mention a couple things before we get into the meat of the actual movie. First of all, it is currently sitting, I believe, at a 48% on Rotten Tomatoes. When we talked about it last week, it was like at a 51, I think. Actually, no, I think it was a 53. The next day it dropped to a 51, and it's now sitting at a 48 with an 80% user score, which is far too high. And if you read some of those, people are basically like beep, boop, 10 out of 10.
Yep. That 48% is still too high, in my opinion.
Yeah. If we're going off of like
that's that Marvel bump.
That's you're kind of not wrong. Yeah, like especially based on some of the reviews we read a couple of weeks ago, where people were like, "You can see the love in the sunrises." I didn't know what was going on in the movie, but the sunrises were very nice. It's like, what?
Oh man.
The reviews are as confusing as this actual movie. But like I was saying, let me mention a couple things about the lead up to this besides just the review scores. You can go back and watch the segments of us talking about the Eternals on our YouTube page. The links to that is obviously in the show notes with the direct me. All right, so lowest rated Marvel movie according to Rotten Tomatoes. Next highest, I think, is Thor Dark World, which is still sitting at a 65, I think, 64, 65, something like that. I may be wrong about that. It's not like it really matters.
There's a big gap in there.
Yeah. Not just that, but we have to talk about, have you watched any of the promotion material for this movie?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot of it. There was a lot from the premiere, and a few things stuck out. The first thing is that the only thing that they were pushing about this movie was the diversity of the cast.
Yes.
Hardcore.
Yes, not that it was a good movie.
No.
Not the storyline, not anything like that, right?
It is hysterical.
Diversity.
Yes. It is to a hysterical level, the way that they pushed this.
Yeah, Dave, and there isn't anything wrong with a diverse cast. Keep that in mind.
Of course. Yeah, that's... See, like, no, there's nothing wrong with a diverse cast, but the funniest thing, one of the funniest things that I saw, there's this Variety article, or Variety interview where a guy who, he's gay, right? and he's got like the craziest deep. It's almost like cartoonishly deep voice.
Mm-hmm.
And he almost sounds like a smoker, like a cartoon. Like if you were to create a character in a cartoon who was a smoker,
this would be
this guy's voice, right? And he's like, "Aren't you so happy to see gays in this movie?" Like that's what this guy sounds like. And everyone's like, "Yes," and they're like, "It is very diverse." And then Angelina Jolie at one point goes, yeah, it's very diverse, but that's not the only thing that matters about this movie. And she says something else, and it cuts to another person. They go, "It's so diverse," you know, and you're like, oh my gosh. It's like, it's clearly the only thing that they care about.
Yes. That's it. It's just about diversity instead of the script, the story, the, connecting, the acting, the scenes, the movement, the going from act 1 to 3.
We're gonna get to some of that. Oh man,
all of that stuff. A cohesive, focused storyline, right?
Okay, so the only other thing I want to mention before we move into the actual is that in that same interview, there's a character in the movie. So one of the superheroes, quote unquote, is gay, and he's married, and the guy who plays his husband in the movie, I think he's Pakistani or
something like that.
He's Middle Eastern. I can't remember exactly where he's from. But the guy is like, how does, say this smoker, this cartoon smoker, asks him how he feels to be playing in a character who is gay in a superhero movie or whatever, because they make this big deal. And this is the same thing they do anytime some sort of diversity takes the scene in one of these Marvel movies, as if there's never been diversity in movies ever before this moment. It's like this, they have just accomplished
crossed the bridge.
Yeah, they've accomplished the dreams of every abolitionist who's come ahead of them in their footsteps, that they have now reached the top of the mountain, right? So this guy, he's like, and his response, he's like, "I wish that I had seen someone like character like this when I was younger." It's like, all right, that okay, whatever. But then he's like, can you imagine how many lives this movie will save because they see characters on a screen who are like them?
Oh, man.
And I swear that clip got hidden from, because I had to go to Variety's page to actually find that specific part of the interview. Couldn't find anything on YouTube. So yeah, I mean, this movie leading up to it, it's like, we have to be honest about this. This is what they were trying to push. It had nothing to do with making a good movie, with making a fun experience, a good, fun Marvel movie, right? It's not as if when Guardians of the Galaxy came out, they were doing this whole thing that was like, the trees are going to be so excited about their representation of Groot. Every green human being will love to see Drax and Gamora, right? The raccoons will be singing the praises of Rocket in this movie. It's like, all right. There's so much more we could talk about on that end, but I'll leave it there. Let's see. So let's start pretty big.
You want to go into kind of like the overarching story of what Eternal's supposed to be, kind of like, what the plot is?
Yeah, so the first two things I have down are writing and story, and they kind of go hand in hand. So let's start with story. How long did it take you to figure out what was going on in this movie? like this is what's happening. Here is the plot.
Yeah. Man, it's a unfocused, confusing mess.
Yes.
It's like at one point you're thinking, it's going to be the... first off, in the beginning, as soon as the Celestial appeared, Erisham or whatever.
Erisham, I think, yeah. I mean,
Erisham,
yeah.
Whatever. Big old red Celestial.
Yeah.
I already knew he was going to be the bad guy somehow. Like,
right.
Duh. That's obvious. But as far as they made it seem like it was going to be the deviants, right? That were going to be the main or the antagonist, right?
Yeah.
And then
spoilers, by the way. We're gonna spoil this entire movie. Not that I think you should go see it, but
no,
you know,
I encourage you to wait until 10 years from now and then see it.
If you are curious, just wait until it's inexpensive on some sort of streaming platform.
Yeah.
Or free on Disney Plus in like 3 or 4 months. Yeah.
It's not even like, there are some movies that are bad that are fun to go see. This isn't even one of them.
No.
But so you have the deviants, and the deviants are the bad guys at first, you think, and they come to feed on intelligent life. And because
for reasons?
Yeah, for reasons. The celestial being says that the intelligent life, the more intelligent life there is on Earth, the more it helps the new celestial that's in the middle of the planet.
Right, that we don't find out any of this until almost the end of the movie, right?
Yeah.
Like it's very...
that it helps it grow and become a new celestial that helps balance the universe, and then you go create another, billions of life on another planet and stuff like that, right?
Right.
And so, come to find out, it's not the deviants that are bad, that feed on the apex predator of every planet, so that that race can increase. It's the Eternals that are robots and who were made by. Both the deviants and the Eternals were made by the celestial being, but the deviants can't evolve. The Eternals can't. The Eternals are basically robots.
Well, yeah, that's what we think, but then they kind of figure out some sort of way to also do the same thing, but it doesn't really work the same way, and it's kind of just a plot convenience so that they can finish the movie. Yeah, you have like three antagonist groups in the movie.
Yep.
One of which you get introduced to at the very beginning.
The Celestial.
Right. One. Let's be generous and say one of them you get introduced to about halfway through when
Deviants.
they find. Yeah. No.
Deviants to begin with.
Deviants,
and then
Celestials. And then the last half hour of the movie, they pull this betrayal plot kind of out of thin air, if we're being totally honest. I had heard rumors about some of this going into it, but it was obvious to some degree where it was headed. And then
it's old Robert Stark that ends up being the betrayer.
Icarus. I've actually pulled up Internet Movie Database on my thing so I can keep up. And I know we're not at characters yet, but the immense amount of characters in this movie does not help making it unconfusing
and cohesive and balanced, and where you can connect with the characters and stuff like that.
The beginning, right? The very beginning of the movie, there were a couple. I wrote this down. The very first thing I wrote down in my notes was word crawl at the start ? Seems pointless.
Word crawl at the start.
What is this? And they're reading it, and I'm like, this movie cost them quite a bit of money to make. I want to say it's $200 million or something was the price tag. It might have been a little lower than that. I was like, you couldn't have put, with all the CG and all these crazy visuals going on in this movie, you couldn't have take that first 3 minutes, had a voiceover with just everything that was going on. You wanted to put a word crawl, an ugly word crawl at that.
Mm-hmm.
And that scene sets up how boring this movie is. Just how the absolute drag of this movie, where it's
listen.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, my wife is very liberal when it comes to movies. Let me rephrase. I don't mean politically and stuff like that. I mean liberal in the sense of she's very generous with how she reviews movies. That's the word to use, generous.
Yeah.
And even she was like, man, this thing is halfway through the movie, she wanted to leave. She's like, this thing is dragging. And I said, no, I'm sorry. We got to stay.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Kayla.
So the writing, it goes right along with the plot and the story. It's all over the place.
Oh, all over the place. It's, I'm repeating myself, but it's so unbalanced. There's no focus. There's so many different storylines and plots that you can just tell, the director only has, I think, three movie credits to her name.
She's an Academy Award-winning director, Joseph.
Yeah.
She got the Academy Award before getting hired onto this one, and then they changed all the promotional material to say Academy Award-winning director Chloe Zhao.
I know.
Pretty good. That's sneaky, Marvel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was probably.
I saw someone today that said the reason why it's getting one of the actors, can't remember which one. There's 50 of them. That lead in this movie. One of them said that the reason why this is getting panned by critics is because a woman directed.
Oh, come now.
And then the other one was said retweeted the what's his name plays Kingo.
Kamal Nanjiani.
Yeah,
Kamal Nanjiani
retweeted it and said, "It looks like we're getting the right demographic mad." And I just,
bro. Okay, so
they definitely live in a bubble.
One of the first lines of dialogue in the movie, right, between Icarus and Cersei, when they're in the spaceship, and she looks at him, she goes, "The planet is beautiful, isn't it?" And then he just goes, "Yes." Like dude, Richard Madden is the biggest block of wood in this movie that I think I've seen in a long time.
With most of these actors, I will say, with most of these actors, I don't think it's their fault. I think it's the writing's fault. How they, have the characters written and
it's
everything. It's
definitely writing and direction that plays
look
into
at
it.
Angelina Jolie. She starred in Tomb Raider and plenty of other action movies and stuff like that, and she has a wide range of acting, right?
Yes. Tomb Raider.
She's a block of wood in this movie.
Dude, she is someone asked me how she did in it, and the way that I describe it is she smolders on screen and fights some stuff, and that's really about it.
Well, Salma Hayek, right?
Yeah.
As Ajak, she block of wood as well. The lead character, Gamba Chan,
she's
or whatever. She's
slightly a slight step above the low tier of how the acting is in this. She's there, she's present, she says her lines, but she is boring. And that's kind of the biggest thing. And it's I don't know. There's I was trying to think of what it was, but there's this scene where her ability, and this is one of the other things that's so confusing, right? Is that their introductions to all the characters are all over the place.
It's all over the place.
Yeah, you almost don't know what some of them are doing until nearly halfway through the movie. What their abilities are, what their purpose in this movie is, how they're going to play any role in it, which, to be honest, some of them get sidelined pretty hardcore by the end of this. It's just they're useless. Half of them are useless for most of the movie.
And they also did a worse job, in my opinion, than The Witcher did with the timeline stuff.
Oh,
going
it's so
back
bad.
and forth way too much.
It's not perfect, but it's Babylon, right? Isn't that where they are for the prequel-y type scenes or the flashbacks or whatever? They should have just done an entire...
Some of them, they're in other places.
Sure. They should have just done an entire movie that took place maybe in the first couple thousand years that they were there. Set up a villain, right? Some sort of deviant, right? So you got to take the deviant from this movie, who's he's gaining abilities or he's gaining smarts. Make up some sort of contrivance, right? I don't care. It's not what's important. Set up a villain for the first couple thousand years, a smart kind of intertwined thing where they're having to struggle between wanting to help the humans but also keeping their place, right? And you could have introduced this new group of characters slowly. Maybe not put all of them in this movie, right? Maybe only put half of them in this movie. Really cut down on the cast. And that could have been the first movie, right? The problem is this feels like almost 3 different movies that they're cramming into one thing. And it's so miserable to watch. And it's and I don't know if I put editing in here. I just want to talk about that for a second. It's so bad.
Oh, that editing is terrible.
All over the place. There's this phrase that Mahler on YouTube uses all the time where they go, "Oh, well, I guess that scene's over." That happens all the time in this movie, where it's everything's going on, or they're doing something. It cuts real hard, and now they're in the past again. And you're like, what is happening?
And it's like, and then the other thing too, you speak on the editing part, they're dealing with losing the loss of, an Eternal or something else. And then all of a sudden, very quickly, they're slapstick comedy.
Dude,
like,
this
you
is
can't
one
take
of
anything serious in the movie.
That is my biggest gripe about this movie. By far the most.
The morals.
Okay. Yeah. The other one's still my biggest one. And here's why. Yeah. You have these somber moments, right? So by now, it doesn't matter. Ajax dies pretty early on. Like she dies before, technically, I think before the movie even starts. It's like but you don't really find that out until later on. And you don't find out who kills her until later on. But she's dead. And that's kind of the centerpiece, at least for a little while, that's bringing them together. There's a moment, right, where they go to see Gilgamesh. And they tell him they're like, Ajax is dead, right? Mm-hmm. And you see him like get really sad, and then it like cuts to a wide shot of him, and he has this pie that he just pulled out of the oven, and then the pie falls all over the floor. And in my crowd, like in the theater I was in, everyone just had this like nervous laughter, like, like, okay, it was kind of funny because of the pie, but what?
No one in the theater even laughed at that part.
And that's the thing, is it's like this happens over and over again.
Yes.
And whose fault is it a majority of the time? Who ruins the somber moments 99% of the time in this movie?
Go ahead. Let them know.
It's Kingo.
Yes.
He like cracks jokes. And it's
all
like
all the time.
Oh, and it's so bad. They're not. I think
the worst one to me was the.
I wish I'd written some of them down.
Killed the deviant, and he says to his helper Kiran, that's his, I don't know, assistant or whatever.
Yeah.
Did you get that on? Because he's doing a documentary, right?
Oh, he's like off screen.
And did you get that? And he's like, yeah, I got it.
Yeah,
and
you're like
that, and it's just,
oh, this is what we're doing, huh?
Yeah, so you can never take any plot
like
out of the 400 there are serious.
The plot, or oh shoot, what was I saying? It's like the jokes feel so forced.
It does, dude.
Who was writing this? Who was it? Did they have like a 12-year-old who thought they were funny?
I had the longest time for me trying to figure out who Sprite was.
I knew just because of some of the jokes that like Nerdrotic has made in the past about that character and the connection to some reviewers maybe liking that character too much.
Because I'm thinking, okay, because I know all the diversity stuff. I'm thinking, okay,
no, you know you know what her diversity is, right?
No.
Cheese pizza.
Oh. One of the things I've noticed that Kayla and I have had a discussion with is, in a lot of shows and movies we watch, there's a lot of comedy geared towards cheese pizza. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it used to be one of those.
And you see that in I don't think there's any comedy like that in this movie, but there's direct like weirdness of, you have Sprite and she is embody a young
she's
female.
Like 15.
She's a child.
She's supposed to be like 15, like look like she's 15, and she doesn't age. And it's kind of her like arc in this movie, but not really, because no one really has an arc in this movie. They're all kind of just, it's like they're all kind of there and things are happening around them, you know?
Yeah, but the point being is that she's a 15-year-old teenager, a child, and she can't age, but she's been around thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
But she's attracted to Robert Starr, Icarus, and he's, mid-20s, late 20s,
he's like early
30s,
I think.
Something like that.
Something like, yeah. And it's weird, and it doesn't really go anywhere. And
yes, it's weird.
It's just like, oh, and they play it off with this whole thing where again King goes like, well, he's Peter Pan and you're Tinkerbell, and it's like, bro, that doesn't make it okay.
No.
And we understand that she's like, and this is the thing, in a better movie, right? Especially that's a plot point in a lot of vampire movies, right? Where a 15-year-old will get bit, and now they're living for eternity, but they're stuck in the body of a 15-year-old. And you can play that in a way that does not come off like creepy. It's very much like a inner, what am I trying to say? Like it's an inner struggle. It's an inner struggle, right? The let the right one in or let me in is like is that, right? Where the vampire, you know, she's, well, sorry, it's been a while since I've seen that. I think they gender swap them in the movies or whatever. Anyway, the vampire character in that movie is thousands of years old or hundreds of years old, and then the other character is like another kid, right? And so to that kid, this is just another kid until they find out who they are. But it's also a very dark story, and so you can play around with elements of that, not saying that it's okay, but understanding each character, where they're coming from, and the perspective of loneliness and the perspective of wanting like that connection with another person or another being.
An adult.
Yeah. And so there's ways that you can play that. And of course, they never go into that in this because this is not a movie that was written by mature people, right? Nope. Going back to like those interviews or whatever, you can see the two people who wrote this movie and they look like 21-year-olds, and they're like, oh, we were so passionate about writing the story that's like for everyone, and you're like, everyone, huh? Anyway, I don't want to harp on that too much. I mean, it's not like a big focus in the movie. It's definitely just a little bit of that, like, okay, like what, like why are we doing this? You know, Sprite gets turned into a human being at the end because that's like where her like plot kind of moves to. Did you even see that part? Did you tell me you left before that happened?
Yeah, I think I did.
Yeah, so she gets like after they beat the quote unquote big bad, she has enough power to turn Sprite human. So she turns her human, and then she gets abandoned by all of them because they all get abducted by the Celestial.
Yep.
It's so like ridiculous. The whole movie is ridiculous. Okay, let's see. Have we talked about acting? We've kind of covered that, right? It's
we did.
So wooden.
The staleness of everyone.
Did anybody
stand out? No.
Like as like, oh, that was at least, yeah. Kit Harington. Kit Harington looks confused the whole time.
He does, and I was kind of wondering why he was even. You know, a lot of these people. I'm like, why are you even here in this movie?
So, let's talk about that a little bit because it does have to do with the characters.
And we need to talk about the problem that we say in every Marvel movie, which is their questionable morals.
Yes, we're gonna get there. That's on my mind. Let me talk about this for a second.
Okay.
So some of the characters that show up in this movie, their only purpose for being in this is to set up properties down the road. Kit Harington is one of those characters. Half of the Eternals kind of fall into that category as well. I was trying to think if there was anybody else.
Harry Styles at the end.
Yeah, then there's the Harry Styles thing that's like, dude, talk about not being able to act. It's laughably bad. Man. And then Patton Oswalt is a cartoon character now, and he's a troll character, and you're like, no. It's like, go away. Please go away. So yeah, let's kind of talk about the morals. Here's the big one. This is the one I wanted to bring up first because it's the one that I wrote down, right? They retcon Thanos a little bit in this movie. Did you catch that?
What do they say? What do you mean?
Thanos, right? So the whole point of like we'll call it the big conflict, just for trying to keep things somewhat clear. The big conflict is that the Earth is going to be destroyed with this emergence because enough human beings are now on the planet so that the Celestial can absorb the energy of the humans. Am I correct?
Yes, and Ajak has known about this for the entire time.
The entire time. The leader always knows, but they get their memories erased, and so that they can go and do this again. There's all these little details that I don't really want to go into because they don't matter. They really don't matter. So this emergence is happening. The world is going to end. The Eternals, change, and they decide to go after that. So the plot point is that there are enough human beings on the planet to allow this to happen. What Thanos did stopped
Yes.
the end of the world.
Yeah, I did catch that.
It delayed it for a certain amount of time. And this is why, yeah, when you talk about the whole like moral thing, it's like you just took what at one point was the best villain that Marvel has had ever and probably ever will at this point. I am imagining that no one's ever going to top him at this point.
Yeah.
And you kind of turned him into a sympathetic hero. Like, oh, Thanos did the right thing.
Yeah, and apparently the Eternals couldn't
we didn't even talk about, oh my God,
get involved when, there was a huge meteor coming to Earth that was going to destroy it. When they said
all of these world-ending events that were going on, right? Okay, and this is where some of the morals get confusing, because they would, by the end of the movie, see some sort of sympathy, even if they believe Thanos did it for the wrong reason, for Thanos doing the right thing.
Which was to snap everybody.
And yeah, to delete half the population of the entire universe, essentially.
Yes.
Right? And I guess the Celestials wouldn't have allowed that to happen, but here's the thing. If that was getting in the way of the problem of the Celestials, right, because they need that to be the case, would that not have been reason to let the Eternals go back to work to stop Thanos from allowing that to happen, which completely contradicts the thing that happens at the beginning of the movie where she goes, no, we weren't allowed to get involved because deviants weren't involved.
Yep.
Even though, canonically, Thanos does have deviant blood.
And on top of that, guess what? They didn't have, none of the Eternals got snapped away either.
Right. And maybe,
luckily.
Yeah. And maybe that's has something to do with them not being like
humans,
real
or
physical
life.
beings. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever. And, right. Do you remember at the end of I think it's the very last flashback, quote unquote, like flashback scene in the movie where they all kind of just decide to do whatever they want?
Yes.
They're like, no, you can't, you're not supposed to take over the minds of this entire population and stop them from murdering each other, right? So if he went and did that, why did it matter whether they went to help stop Thanos in the first place if that's what they wanted to do?
Yep.
It's so dumb. It's like, this is why the writing is bad.
It's okay to enslave people as long as it stops them from war and stuff like that, right?
Yes. Okay. I wrote cinematography down.
Oh, the other thing I was going to talk about too, just real fast, is I was going to say sex scene. Thought was odd for a Marvel movie since who it's marketed towards. Also, killing people to create more life, weird, and then also a child being in love with an adult, also weird.
Right. But okay, and the whole thing about like killing people to create more life, yeah, they kind of point that out as being like wrong. It's everything that kind of surrounds everything else that's happened before, during, and before this movie and during this movie, and I assume things that will come later on. It's just another one of these this weird morality that the Marvel movies have, where it's like stuff doesn't make sense. Characters' actions don't seem to make a lot of sense. You're basically told
scenes don't.
Yeah, it's like even with the whole Sprite thing, you're told she's in love with Icarus, and you're like, I haven't really seen that up until then. It's like you could argue.
I didn't even know. I didn't even catch that. And then Kingo says, "Isn't it obvious?"
Yeah, and it's like no, it's because it wasn't there. No, they did not. That wasn't a thing, and they're just now going, well, now this is a plot point. You go. It's the same way with editing, where you're like, oh, okay, I guess this is it now. Like, this is where we are now. We're done with that other thing, and now we're here. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, and then they have this like forced sex scene, right? The movie's got
because they do like, what is it? Is it halfway through the movie? They do I guess not. I guess it's pretty early on. One of the plot points is also the love triangle, I guess you want to say, going on between her and Cersei and Icarus,
which is like there, and then it's like not there, and it makes no sense. There's been nothing in the movie that makes any sense as to why she would go back to him.
Yep.
And then he betrays them all
again, and
then like he's like upset, even though it didn't really matter that he had done that, and then he flies in the sun.
Yeah. Oh, so suicide was the other point I wanted to mention, is that he just flies into the sun. This is how we handle our emotions: we kill ourselves.
Right. It's no. That is a moment of visuals. But what I'm trying to say is, oh my gosh.
Isn't there in Greek mythology where that's
Icarus? Yeah, he flies too close to the sun. Icarus. They mention it like a million times beforehand. And then the one guy, and this is again talking about stuff that was never there before, and then all of a sudden they're like engineer character at one point goes, "I've been waiting to clip your wings for a long time," and like there was no animosity like that.
Nope.
Up until that moment, right? It's like none of it is earned at all.
And then Angelina Jolie is having this problem where her memories being disordered. That's one of the plot points for her throughout the whole movie. And then once the big deviant shows up, all of a sudden,
she beats him and then she's fine, and it's never talked about again. You're like, oh, okay, I guess everything's okay now. One of the other things I wanted to talk about, it's kind of plot related. So there's this whole like hour and a half, maybe even longer. Let's just say hour and a half, because I was trying to keep track of time to see when certain things were happening, but it was hard to like, it's like if you turn away for 2 seconds, they're in a completely different environment and new things are happening without any warning. But they go through this whole like plot line, right? And then they go to get Druig, the guy who can control people's minds. They have this whole scene play out, right? Gilgamesh dies, right? So Ajax and Gilgamesh die before they ever get to Phastos. He is not involved in this movie until like the last 45 minutes, give or take. Yeah. And it's like, okay, Disney, so you push the gay characters to the end of the movie, huh? You give their relationship like a 5-second thing, and then we're moving right along, right? Which is very common for Disney, who is supposed to be like, oh, look how diverse we are. Look what we're doing. We're so brave. Lives will be saved because of this 5 seconds of a movie. You're like, and this is the thing, is like, people fall for that stuff. And, we talked, well, I don't really want to bring that up, but we have talked in the past about companies not actually caring about the things that they say that they care about, right? Because I want to keep this focused on this review. Disney does not care about your skin color, your sexual orientation, or any of the diversity that people are. And we haven't even talked about. And I really didn't have much of an issue with the deaf character. She's like the speedster, and she's deaf or whatever.
Actually, she's probably one of the better characters.
Yeah, I mean, she's just part of that is because she has no actual lines of dialogue.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say. Good on her. It worked out for her character.
Yeah. But they are basically.
In which there were questions I had about that didn't make sense. That seemed forced
weird
as well.
Well, it was weird. Yeah, it was weird. Oh, hang on. Let me finish this point. Hang on. Let me finish.
Ajax has the healing power. Sorry.
Right. Let me finish this point because it goes beyond that. Disney doesn't care about these people. They are pawns to be used to make them money. And now that this is not going to make them as much money as they thought that it was going to, because they've gone down this like, oh, let's be as diverse as possible because we want to be all things for all people in this very shallow way. They're going to toss most of these people aside. They don't care. It's not going to matter. At some point, people will turn on this movie like they did with The Last Jedi, Ghostbuster 2016, all of this stuff that goes super hardcore into intersectionality. And you will see, I guarantee you, within or sometime after the next year, some of these actors are going to come out and be like, we were used. Disney doesn't care about us, and everyone will be so upset. And it's like, we'll still be here going, duh. Right?
You're just finding out now.
Yeah, but let's mention this deaf character for like a second.
Yeah.
Because I inappropriately laughed at one point in the movie because of her. But also, you're right. Ajax can heal people, right? She heals wounds.
Right.
Like, why wouldn't she be able to like heal the problems with someone who's deaf? Here's the other problem. These characters are essentially supposed to be gods, right? why would you make someone like, why would you give someone who is supposed to go and be like a god among these like mortal men or mortal creatures? Why would you give them some sort of, and people will be upset calling it a defect, right? Because it's like, oh, you made that way. It's like, but they were literally created to be these all-powerful beings, right? It's the same problem I have with Festus being overweight.
Yep.
It's like, huh? You know,
doesn't make any sense.
No,
right?
it doesn't make sense for the plot. It doesn't. We're not saying that there's something wrong with her being deaf, right? Which I have to say,
or him being overweight, right? I'm overweight. You know, like there's nothing wrong with, again, you say overweight. I mean, I guess like, what's the way to say it? There's nothing wrong with her being deaf. There's nothing wrong with him
because
necessarily being overweight.
Right.
But when you're creating a character that's supposed to be, as you just said, this all powerful being, this god, right? Like character, you know, and that may even be too strong, but you know, a robot perfect in every way, so to say. And again, it's not that a character can't have a fault, but it's like it doesn't even go into, again, too many characters, so they can't do this. But it doesn't go into her background. Okay, was there something that
why is she that way?
Not be able to get healed by Ajax, like something, you know what I mean? Like nothing.
You're just supposed to
all.
accept it.
Yeah,
and it doesn't make sense.
It's like again, there, as we've said already, there's nothing wrong with being deaf, but it's like saying,
well, hang on, let me put it this way.
Yeah,
it's the same annoyance I have in this movie of certain characters who are like the fighter characters being stronger and better than other fighting characters. Like Icarus is essentially Superman in this movie. Like he's like a step away from being Superman, right?
Which they make an obvious joke about it, and it's like, we didn't know.
So stupid.
Yeah,
and then you have Gilgamesh, who is also a fighter, but cannot fly, is strong but doesn't seem to be quite as strong. And you're like, why? Like, why are there different power levels?
And then Kingo shoots the finger guns.
And that's it. That's like his thing. And you're like, and he's even lamer than the other two. And then you have Thena, Angelina Jolie's character, who is like, okay, like you're supposed to be this like super strong warrior. You're like, you've been around for a really long time. There's like legends about you, so on and so forth. But you don't really get the feeling that she's like the best, right?
Yep.
She kills the big one of the big bads at the end of the movie, and it's like, all right, bro, I don't know. I'm trying to think if let me look at my notes. I need to see if there was anything else that like
stood out to you.
Oh, one more thing, I think.
Okay.
So at the end of the movie, right? And it's just another one of those plot things where you go, this makes no sense. Like, why would this be the way you did this? So Icarus and Sprite betray the rest of the Eternals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard for me to even say betray, because you can kind of understand Icarus's point of view in this scenario, because it's like, well, he's just doing what he was programmed to do / what he believes is right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfair in a way to say that he's like a villain, because it's just a different perspective on, well, we were told that this was our purpose.
Mm-hmm.
This has always been our purpose. Why are we now making an exception? And no one gives like a really good reason for it, right?
They don't really go into that well.
Okay, so that happens because...
How could they even change their mind if they've been programmed to only do one thing?
Yeah, it's very weird the way that works out. And I think there's supposed to be some sort of idea that because they've lived with the humans for so long, there's been some sort of breakthrough and connection with that, which I'd be fine with if that was developed better at all. If it was developed at all, I would be fine with it, right? And it's barely mentioned. You have to like put this stuff together yourself without any real understanding of like how much any of the Eternals care about human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So they betray him. Cersei is like getting ready to try to finish the job or whatever, because she's kind of our heroine, you know, whatever. And then Sprite stabs her in like the side, right? She's invisible. She tricks her. Somehow she shows this like image of Salma Hayek, and I went like audibly in the theater. I went, "What is going on?" I know. and I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, yeah, right. Sprite. She's a character. She can like manipulate stuff. She's a trickster, kind of."
Yeah.
Even though that, it was like, why did that fool Cersei at all? It was like, she's dead, so why would she be here? And then she stabs her in like this really weird position. And I understand Sprite's shorter than her, but it's already been established that she's kind of feisty and she can like jump and she can, she's pretty agile. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to like, if the motivation of a character, right, is like, well, we've betrayed you, we're like all in on stopping you guys from doing this, why would she not go for a killing blow on Cersei?
Yep.
She just kind of like
when she has the opportunity to.
Yeah, she does like a flesh wound, and she like kind of stops her, right? And then the only other time I laughed out loud in the theater is when Druig out of nowhere comes up behind her and just smashes her with a giant rock in the face. I just went, oh my God, and started laughing.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought about.
Bro,
child abuse.
I was cracking up so hard. Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about this for like a while.
An hour almost. So
I don't know. I don't think I had anything else. Oh, no. The after credits stuff. I mean, we kind of mentioned it before. Thanos' brother is now part of the universe.
MCU.
Star Fox. He looks nothing like Thanos. Also, somehow he's an Eternal. So is he not really Thanos? Like, there's just no like answers to any of this. It's almost like they want you to go look up the Wikipedia to it so that you're continued to be drawn in, which it didn't. Yeah, right. It's like, okay, whatever. And then the last scene is the last end credit scene is Kit Harington opening, like being weird, like weirdly spazzy about opening this box that belonged to one of his ancestors that essentially holds this evil sword that turns him into Black Knight.
Yeah. And you can go read all about Black Knight yourself, right? To understand who he is, because we don't care. The only thing anyone is excited about, and I say excited very like herp-de-derp, people are excited about next product thing to come, is that like Blade's voice, Mahershala Ali, his voice tells him, he goes, are you sure you want to do that or whatever? And it ends. And of course, most of the people, even the Marvel stands in the audience, unless they knew about it going into that, were like, huh? Because it's like, it doesn't make sense. No one was there. What? It's so bad. It's bad filmmaking. Everything's so forced.
It's bad filmmaking, Joseph, and I don't like it. And at some point, people have to start accepting that Marvel has no idea what they're doing.
Yeah. The worst part about this is I was expecting to go see a fun, bad movie. Like, that I'm going to laugh because this is so bad. Man, I felt like I was having to push myself through to get through this movie. That's how bad it was.
I feel you. All right. Well,
I think a great way to sum it up was what I was just thinking about was what I texted you earlier. I'm going to pull it up real fast. I think I have it right here. Eternals. A movie requires intelligent life to fuel growth.
Yeah, it's not a smart movie. There's nothing like... Yeah. It's baffling, right?
It is.
And then to think of all the people that are just so die-hard defending this. It's like, why is this the hill you want to die on? This movie...
Pretty effects, David. Pretty, son.
I would expect it from like the next Spider-Man movie, even if it's bad.
Yeah.
I would expect that, Spider-Man. Not from this. Yeah. Oh, it's so brave and inspiring, and the sun rises.